Good morning to those of you here and those watching at home. Now, obviously, we're talking today... I can't see a screen, can I? Yes. We're talking about discipleship. And, you'll notice I've given it a capital D because it's the title, so it has a capital D. But don't be put off by that word, because it never had that capital at the beginning. It's one of many words used in the New Testament to address or identify a Christian. It could be a follower of the way, a believer, the brethren, a servant, the faithful, the church, even saint, and that didn't have a capital S either. These words are completely interchangeable. In fact, the word Christian is only used 3 times in the whole of the New Testament and never by Jesus. He routinely used the word disciple to describe those whom he called to follow him. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now, this call to follow is universal, if anyone, but it's also uniquely personal. It's you who is called. When Jesus called those first disciples to follow, they literally walked away from their life and their livelihood, and they followed him throughout Palestine for the next 3 years. Now, our journey will almost certainly look different, but the principle remains. We are called to follow Jesus wherever he goes, whatever he does, whatever he says, and to be honest, that's where this sermon could end. It's not going to, but that's where it could end, because that's it. That's the top and bottom of it. We follow Jesus because he was always simple and he was always straightforward. It's us that complicates things. Think of someone like Francis of Assisi in the 12th century. He heard those words. He read what Jesus said in that block of teaching that we refer to as the Beatitudes, and he said, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do exactly what you said. He chose to live on what he described as the edge of the inside, at the very margins of society. He chose to live alongside the people that he had been called to love and to serve. His beliefs were quite orthodox, but his life and his teaching was very radical. And just like Jesus, he scandalized the religious elite of his day because he was determined to share the gospel, not just with his mouth, but with his life. Now, the hierarchy did get their own back after his death, because within 2 years, they'd made him into a saint, and then they built this enormous 2-tier basilica in Assisi. And worst of all, they reinvented him as the bird bath Francis. Nice old guy, but really, not one of us. Okay? The gospel says, come, follow, listen, hear, see. Now, we're not living in 1st century Palestine or 12th century Italy for that matter. This is Warminster and it's 2022. Now, we're meeting here in Christ Church, but who are we? Those of us that meet in this building? That's what we're trying to clarify through our core values. Not just who we are, but who we aspire to be. And one fundamental aspect of this is that we are disciples, committed to lifelong learning. Disciple and learner come from the same word. It's the same root. If you imagine that you've already arrived, that you're fully formed and lacking in nothing, then this probably isn't the place for you. You might consider a career in politics, where you can be with like-minded people. In the meantime, the rest of us, we're going to continue learning. We see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. What does it mean to follow Jesus? What does it look like? Well, this is the verse that we heard before. We need to start at the beginning with that call to come. You cannot be a disciple. You cannot begin this journey unless you have received Christ as Lord. And this isn't a matter of words. It's not a magic formula. It's a matter of fact. You either are a follower of Jesus or you're not. You may have had a Damascus Road experience, but much more likely it was a longer, more prolonged period of searching. Whatever, doesn't matter. This is the beginning of the journey of faith, not the end. Continue to live your lives in him, rooted and built up in him. So the voice that we listen to must be the voice of Jesus. When we pray, sing, read, as we go about the general routines of our lives, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, another aspect of discipleship is that it can't be accidental. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It's intentional. Intentional on the part of the individual, you and me, who seeks to draw closer to Jesus, but also intentional on the part of the church in its commitment to make disciples. Paul says, "Let all things be done for building up." Are we open to the possibility that some things may need to change in our personal lives or in the way that we do things in church? So earlier, Lorraine made note of same verse. We use this verse as the children go to their classes, and you'll be aware that we learn differently. We teach differently. You know, some of us are more comfortable listening. Others like to be active when we're learning. Some people need a visual. We're different. We have different age groups. We have different backgrounds. We have different ways of learning. And there is much, for example, that we can learn from our young people, from our children, from our little disciples. I was thinking as we were talking before, our grandson's just completed a 2K run, the park run. He's 6. Now, he has seen his parents do the park run for as long as he can remember. They do 5K, he does too. Because he saw them do it, he wants to do it, and that's great. What I hadn't realised is that he's now teaching his sisters too. So they were practicing yesterday, and he starts by doing a few exercises. So he does a few press-ups, then he does a few sit-ups, and he's got Eloise doing the same. And when she does a press-up, she does what looks like a downward dog. She puts her head on the floor and sticks her bum in the air. That's her press-up. She struggles with doing the other one. She looks like a stranded whale. And then they go in the garden and they run, and she rotates her arm like this because she thinks the faster she rotates her arm, the faster she'll run. But you get the principle. He's seen his parents. He teaches his sister. That's it. That seems to be how it works. So if you want to know a bit more, have a look at what Rooted do. Speak to Ben. Go to Messy Church. These are amazing things. 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago, we came to Wiltshire with our young. Our daughters were just little, 2 and 4. And we wanted to find a church where our daughters would thrive. It wasn't just about us. It was where we as a family could thrive. And they were an excellent barometer of the family-friendly church. The quicker they fell asleep or said very loudly embarrassing things like, "When will this talking ever end?" then we knew that we were probably not going to go back to that place. We can learn so much from our children, so much from our young people, if we're prepared to listen. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven." There is no way that this is excluding any other group. As with any family, we are a complete and often messy mix of every age and every type of person. We're here to teach, to learn from, to encourage, to promote, to do all those things that make this family function. Now, Paul explains to the Corinthians that there are varieties of gifts, services, and activities, but the crucial thing is that it's the same Spirit, it's the same God who empowers them all in everyone. And notice again, everyone, all the disciples, not the elite, not the special few, all. We are each empowered and enabled to do whatever is necessary. Jesus said that a disciple will bear much fruit, but for what purpose? For the common good. So another question, are you exercising your gifts? And if not, why not? Because we need each other. We need each one of us to be growing and to be exercising those gifts. Now, returning to that reading from before, our disciples, you, me, we are learners. Learners need to be taught. But I would commend you to choose your teachers wisely. If the only teaching that you ever have had is this 20 minutes once a week, then you're probably going to be in reception class for quite some time. There are some amazing resources within this fellowship, within the wider church, and beyond. Now, personally, I use, at the moment, I do tend to change, I do tend to move around, but I'm very encouraged and very challenged by the resources produced by the Bible Society and also the Centre for Action and Contemplation. They're probably the two that I go back to. Now, from time to time, I will change because I sort of get bored or I'm not in that particular mode of thinking, but you do need to be careful. Now, there was no internet in Paul's day. Now, you will know, if you use the internet at all, that there is some amazing stuff online, but there's also a lot of dangerous rubbish on there, and you do have to be careful. It purports to be gospel truth, but when you look, when you check, you think, really? And we're back to what was happening in Paul's day, in that letter to the Colossians. They didn't have the internet, but they were subject to some very scary, unnecessary, manipulative teaching. It had the appearance of wisdom, but it was promoting self-made religion. Use those two things as your key. Is it just promoting religion? Is it all referring back to me, to the person who's promoting this thing? If you can't hear Jesus speaking, then it's not worth listening to. Go somewhere else, take it off. The beginning, the middle, and the end is Jesus. When he was about 12 years of age, his parents took him to the temple in Jerusalem, and Luke records Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. This was the pattern of his life. As his disciples, it has to be the pattern of our lives. We are required to grow up. That is, to grow up in every way into him who is the head, who makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. You'll notice that this is, almost symbiotic. I grow, you grow, we grow. It's win-win. Jesus is the Good Shepherd. Those of us that know him, that recognize him, we hear his voice, we follow.